Welcome, ladies. I want to welcome you to the first IMB Women's Girl Chat. I want to thank everybody for coming here. We're going to just speak on the current state of the culture of society right now, what's affecting us. Of course, right now, the two main issues that come to my mind are COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement. So I have three wonderful speakers here with me, and I just want to go ahead and just introduce them. First, I want to go ahead and introduce Arri Henry. She is a creative director, writer, and photographer for the Westside Gazette newspaper, one of the oldest Black-owned and operated newspaper in South Florida. She is a mom of two and the founder of Keep a Happy Home with her husband to encourage healthy living and the inner work required to maintain peaceful relationships and environments. Welcome, Arri.
Hi, thank you for it.
I want to go ahead and move on to introduce our next speaker, which is Essie Fynn-Obeng, a community organizer based in Miami, whose work focuses on economic and racial justice for Black communities. Hi, Essie.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you. And then next we have is Charlaine. Charlaine, come on, let people hear about you. I want you to speak on yourself because I know you have a lot to say. So go ahead, Charlaine. Let the people know about you.
Hi, everyone. I am Charlaine Loriston. I tend to like to introduce myself as I am first and foremost a Black woman, first generation of American of African descent by way of Haiti. I actually work in the public health realm, and I do a lot of work with trying to educate, re-educate our people in terms of health, but most importantly, I do so by doing more community development to help our communities become happiest and healthiest, and I have done so both here domestically as well as abroad. And I also focus a lot of my work with reorganizing, or rather organizing the Black communities wherever I am in to work on more health-related projects.
Thank you. Okay, I'm learning something new every day about you. All right, so let's just dive right into it. So Essie, I know we have you for a limited time, so I want to just speak to you on certain issues. We want to go right into the current events. We're going to talk about the global protestings or this national protesting that's going on with the Black Lives Matter movement. So with the recent protests that have sparked nationwide discussions on racism in the United States, what are your thoughts and feelings in regards to the nation's progress, and are you optimistic about any change?
I mean, first and foremost, I think that in spite of everything that is happening, I mean, it's crazy. Like I've told a lot of folks, you know, Black folks, just do what you got to do because right now we're in the middle of a, you know, economic crisis, a health pandemic, you know, and then now we have to put our bodies on the line. Like, you know, it's not anything new, but then we're putting our bodies on the line to, I guess, go into this another cycle of police killings that's happening, right? And so for me, I am feeling optimistic because it does kind of feel like folks may think that everything's happening because of George Floyd and because of the video. And yeah, I do believe that was something that definitely triggered this current moment. But I believe that, you know, there is a spiritual law that says you reap what you sow. And I believe that there's been work that has been happening with organizers and just movement leaders who have been sowing into this work for so long. And so this is their moment to leverage this moment and use it for a big win for this movement. So whether you are organizing and you're in labor, whether you are in health, you know, whether you are doing political work, this is like your moment. This is our moment, right? And so there's so much in the midst of all this, there's so much political wins that's also happening too, right? I mean, there is a lot of performance activism that's happening, but I believe that that's why it's our job as organizers to stay focused and to have demands and to organize folks around our demands so that we can leverage this moment for our good, you know? And so I am optimistic. I believe if we continue to stay focused and we continue to stay grounded, I believe that there's a lot that we can do and we can leverage in this moment.
Arri, I wanted to see for those who want to get involved, and I'm asking the same question to you as well, are you optimistic? Do you see the progress or the change? You know, is it going to be effective in the movement of just trying to get attention to police brutality and just civil rights just for Black and brown bodies?
I'm definitely optimistic. I think that we want to see change happen immediately, but I'm okay if my great grandchildren benefit from what it is that we're doing right now. Our ancestors didn't expect to see things in their current lifetime like they did it for us, so we should definitely have that same prism moving forward for the future. I'm so happy to see so many allies, you know, fighting with us. I think that's really important. I'm not sure if we had such a large amount of support as we do today as we did back then. So I definitely think that the future looks bright. It's gonna maybe get worse before it gets better, and we have to be prepared for that also.
And I wanted to ask you, Charlaine, about how do we get involved? We're seeing everything that's going on, the unrest, the protests, and even sometimes not even just the burning down of certain institutions. Mm-hmm. How would someone want to get involved, whether it's out in the streets, whether it's organizing, or whether it's in some form of just donating resources? How do we get involved?
You know, this is a conversation that I've had with several people, and that's just that everyone has a role to play. Not everyone is going to be out in the streets burning things down. Not everyone is going to be in front of a picket fence or picket line rather. But we all have a specific role to play. And that first starts with looking within and looking at what our strengths are. What are those things that you can bring to the table? If you are in law, for example, we need you on that side to help us understand the laws that are working for or against us. To go out into the communities and provide the educational services that is needed to re-educate the miseducated. You know, we need individuals basically to go out and see what other people are doing and find your place, because I believe in order for us to be successful, there needs to be a multimodal approach into how we attack the situation at hand. Protesting alone is not going to help. Just like writing petitions or writing to our Congress people is not going to help alone. But by galvanizing the community and really helping to re-educate on so many different aspects, whether it be on law, whether it be on health, whether it be on you know, just putting your body out there and being that person to physically put yourself at risk. We need all hands on deck. Now, I cannot personally define what it is that each person will do, but it is something that each person will have to do a lot of deep searching within to figure out, okay, where is my place in all of this? We all have a role. So if that means just having conversations with your family members, having conversations with your neighbors, your coworkers, all of this goes a long way.
And I do want to add to that too, because I most certainly agree, but this is an election year, it's 2020. So in spite of, everybody has a part to play. And I believe that a lot of folks, they may think that protesting, and some folks may even feel bad that they're not protesting, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I want to be mindful that as Black folks, we are in a health pandemic where we are the most impacted. And so if that's not your lane, that's not your lane. But protesting is not just one tool. Protesting is actually an agitation tool. It's something that gets leveraged to agitate your target, you know? And so like there's a lane for protesting, but there's also another lane for like petitioning. There's also another lane called voting. There's also, if you're a health professional, like there's a lot of things that we need to do in that institution as well. There's like so much things that require us to work together. That's why like, you know, I agree strongly with that. But I also want to be mindful of folks understanding that just because you're not in a particular lane doesn't mean you got to be like, well, you need to be this, you need to do that. No, everybody has a different part to play. And I think the most important thing is, instead of figuring out what what kind of like the differences that there are. We have to focus on what is going to bring us together. And that's what I mean by we have to be organized. We have to have demands, like what are we actually doing for? And that's how all those different things play in together. When we know like what we're actually building, what we're actually fighting for, what we're standing, what are we trying to win, what are we trying to accomplish in this moment, then that's how we collectively win.
Yes, and thank you for saying that, Essie. It's something that I recently had a conversation with someone, and I said, look, you know, none of us are going to be on the same page in terms of the path to get there, but we need to be on the same page as far as the direction that we're going. What is the end message? What is the end goal? Because if we are divided on what the end goal is, then we will have problems with getting there. But the different approaches that we take to get to that final result that we all want is what needs to be focused on.
Definitely. I want to ask, I know this is not on the list, but I wanted to ask, how much impact do you feel like the media plays in the narrative in bringing forth these protests? Because now I'm going down my timeline, now I'm watching the news, it doesn't seem as prevalent as it used to. And how does that affect people wanting to join the movement in that impact?
What do you mean that's prevalent? What do you mean by that?
Like coverage. How does coverage plays into the narrative and us getting involved?
I think you have to control what they cover.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. I think that it's nothing. It's just like with anything. I think that you have to be in control with what the media covers. And I think that the only difference from now than before is that we are in control, being that we have access to a smartphone and we have access to an internet. And so we get to control the narrative. You know what I'm saying? And so we have a little bit control over the narrative. I'm not saying that it's perfect, but the reality is now that we have more access to the, you know, interwebs, there's a different narrative that's coming to play. And so I think that even if you are in a organization or even as an organizer, activist, wherever you are, you have to do the work to control the media. Because if you don't control the media, then the media will come with their own narrative and control.
Yeah. So, and I would also add to that too, that what we see on mainstream media, to Essie's point, is not the only source of news. So we have to be more intentional about where we get our information from. You know, if that means looking at foreign news, for example, looking from the outside looking into the U.S., then that's what we should be looking at. But just simply relying on one source, whether it be CNN or Fox News, et cetera, you're always going to be blinded by whatever information that they are only sharing to you. You know, we have to stop allowing knowledge to seek us, but instead we need to seek that knowledge ourselves. So we need to do the exploration and be willing to learn from different resources.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Working for a Black-owned newspaper, I think we validate ourselves from what we see on TV, and that's just not where the real work is, right? Mm-hmm. Unless something devastating happens, well, you now see the protests or either just a 2-second bit. So we just have the courage to have the courage to change where we're receiving our news from. Mm-hmm. Like she said, it's in our smartphones. Some of our homies are our new news anchors, right?
That's true.
A whole bunch of coverage all over.
If you're not getting the education yourself, then I guess you just want to be blind. And to speak to that, it's like if it bleeds, it leads. Because I come from a background of just working in the newspaper, so that's what they're just focused on, just whatever is going to get the most attention, the most shock value. But I want to stay on topic and move on to the next question. So I want to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and Black women and their role and just the history role in civil rights and protests. So should Black women continue to be at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement? Why or why not? Essie, we'll start with you.
I was gonna say, I was like, yeah. I mean, it's nothing new that it's not a new phenomenon. Black women, the backbone of revolutions. I mean, this always goes all the way back to the continent. Like Black women have always been the backbones of revolutions. So why stop now? I mean, there's so many challenges, of course, and you know, but they're not new challenges. Like you can't change being Black. So long as we're Black and so long as we're impacted, like we're always going to be in this fight? I mean, does that mean that we should accept complacency and we should accept passivity from our male counterparts? No, I think that we're doing a good job challenging them and asking more to be more present, to take up more space where it's needed, to take to step back where they need to as well. But for the most part, like, this fight we're in it for the long haul.
Piggyback off of that, that question might come from someone in the sense of the misogynoir that might be placed there with the visibility that George Floyd death got versus the Breonna Taylors and the Say Her Names and the Sandra Blands. I guess that feeling of us being as the backbone of the revolution, we don't get the most coverage in the revolution sometimes. So how does that combat with that in us continuing to be those leaders and forerunners in the front?
I just think it just comes with continuing to challenge that complacency of men to be silent and to be less rigorous in getting justice when it comes to Black women. I also think it also comes to educating ourselves around some of the beliefs we may have. For some reason we have a lot of patriarchal beliefs, and we are we tend to kind of favor just like Black male leadership, you know what I'm saying? And like, not to say there's nothing wrong with that, but what I'm saying is that there's a lot of education that we have to do on our part. There's a lot more challenging that we have to do on our part. But I guess my goal is like, it's not enough to get weary and to fall back. It's just, we just have to now, and I think that we're getting there, where more than ever in this moment, we're kind of saying that we need each other. And like, we can no longer allow things to happen the way it has, So even though Breonna Taylor has faced justice, you still see a lot more support in saying like, nah, we can't do what we did last time. Like, we cannot continue to allow this happen as before. So that's why my answer is more so like, we may get weary, but the fight still continues. But that doesn't mean that we don't educate ourselves and, even talk about the ways of which, like, why do we react this way and don't react that way? Why do we think about things that way and don't think about this that way? And there's just a lot of unlearning and and that we have to do when it comes to, even when we think about movements, even when we think about revolutions. I think I was telling someone the other day that like, we have a tendency to kind of have a very like masculine lens when it comes to revolution. Like, the revolution doesn't always have to be like violence. Sometimes it's joy. Sometimes it's actually like being able to take care of one another, and stuff like that. And so there's a lot that we have to kind of unlearn, but I think that we're doing that and we're getting there, It just doesn't stop.
Arri, I wanted to get your thoughts on the question.
Black women are going to do what we've got to do at all costs. But I say that to say that we really do need our brothers to stand on our side. We had a Black Women's March here in Fort Lauderdale 2 years ago, and there were only a couple of brothers walking for, the rights and protection of Black women. And, I get it. I think a lot of our brothers are hurting and don't really know how to fight. I think that they are used to us leading the charge, but I will say, like, I want my man standing right next to me, fight. And I don't want them to feel like we're trying to be feminists in this fight either.
I think one of the things that we have to just to state to those men who may not know what to do is just, hey, just follow us. Right. Period. When I have white colleagues or friends or acquaintances say, hey, what can we do to help? And I say, hey, why don't you go follow what these Black organizations are doing? You don't have to recreate the wheel. Just follow what they're doing. They know exactly what it is that the Black community needs. And it's the same thing I would say to our men, even if you don't understand exactly how to do things because you've been living in your bubble as a male, and have not been seeing things through our lenses, just follow us, hear us, okay? And most importantly, remember that we are your sisters, your mothers, your grandparents, your aunts. and have our backs, But to the point about Breonna Taylor, I do hope that we will see a change, because for far too long, our issues, women who have been kidnapped and sex trafficked, et cetera, all of these things have been kept silent, not within the Black community, but within the global media perspective in general. And so I really hope that now, with all that has imploded, that we will see more emphasis on, hey, what's going on with the most disrespected person in America, the Black woman.
And I also want to add something, because I believe that, yeah, it may be a reality that some folks and some of our men don't know what to do, but I do think a large portion is there's a lot of miseducation, a lot of unlearning, and a lot of internal work that needs to happen, because we don't believe certain tropes and certain perceptions about Black women. And reality is Black girls and Black women have been killed, and there's been a deafening silence to the prison pipeline, to the healthcare system, to there's so many ways in which Black women and Black girls are being killed in this country, and there's just normalized violence against Black women, and for some reason there's a deafening silence. And I think there's a lot of unlearning that we have to do about Black women. There's this feeling that Black women don't get a chance to feel protected. We don't get a chance to feel nurtured. We don't get a chance to feel taken care of. And so you have to kind of ask yourself why, why did the belief that the Black woman is so strong that she could take care of herself, but she doesn't need anyone to her side? That's something that has to be unlearned. There's also internal work, internal misogyny that has to happen. I mean, it's been interesting because there was a thread on social media where they say, hey, Black women, Black men, say something, endearing to Black women. And most of the stuff I heard, the main things I heard was either about our body parts or about the way we can bear trauma. That's a problem.
Song is not a compliment.
Here's the thing. Honestly, it's based on the stereotypes. It really is. Let's take, for example, why is it that when a Black man is walking down the street, he's perceived as dangerous by the white woman? Society has put this picture that a white woman, she is fragile and she is innocent. The Black man, he is a criminal. He's a danger. The Black woman, she's angry, but she can handle a whole lot. So these stereotypes, we need to break these things down, because just because I'm a strong Black woman doesn't mean I need to be strong all the time. Okay, I have to have room to be vulnerable like everyone else. And so, and I think Malcolm X said it best, when he said the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman, the most unprotected person in America is the Black woman, and the most neglected person in America is the Black woman, because it is the absolute truth. Somehow, some way along, throughout history, we have become the scum on the bottom of everyone's shoes. And we have endured so much as a result of it, of constantly being ignored and constantly being told to sit aside. Okay. And to Essie's point, this all starts with re-education. It really, really does. But it also starts at home, because unfortunately, I grew up, I mentioned earlier, and probably not on the live, but being a first generation American, and I have, now I have two sisters and two brothers, but before my newest siblings came into the world, it was just one boy, and my mother coddled him so much. And now he, as a man, my sister and I are constantly like, hey, dude, you need to be a man. You have been coddled so much, you've been sheltered so much that you're not even aware of these things that are happening. You should be protecting the woman, your mother, your sisters, etc. And too many of us have not had that in our households as well. And then you have what's happening in the streets where you see most of our men are not even there to be that father figure for our boys. So it's a lot of things that we have to work within the community to help break that down.
I had an opportunity to serve in the Peace Corps in Guinea, West Africa. And I was living in a village community. And one of the things that I noticed was just how how the children were with the women. I mean, it was just like watching an elephant and the baby elephant. The children followed the women everywhere. And it was a lot of learning from the woman. And I think that we have lost that.
This will definitely be available on imbwoman.com and on our Facebook Live, imbwoman. So thank you, Essie, for touching on that, because I was thinking about the superwoman trope and how sometimes that can be very damaging towards a Black woman. And also some of the compliments that we get, like, oh, you're very strong, or, oh, you know, almost like we're just unreal, and that we don't get to practice that femininity very freely because we're supposed to carry the whole weight of the household or the family. And that is our role, just being continuously to be nurturing. And then that nurture doesn't always come back to us. Go ahead and move on to the next question. And this is for everyone, whoever wants to begin. In your previous work, whether in the protesting or the peace organization or civil rights, how did you feel as a Black woman? Empowered, overwhelmed, joyous? I know, Arri, you briefly touched on that when you did a Black Women's Walk recently in your community. How did you feel during that organization of that protest?
I think I feel all of those emotions. And sometimes you can feel all of that in just one moment. I feel empowered most of the time, but I get overwhelmed. And sometimes I have to just take a break for myself because if I'm not recharged, I'm no good in the movement. And I take a back seat when I start to feel that way. And sometimes that's often. I take a break from social media when need be, take a break from actually watching the news if I have to. Working in a newspaper industry, sometimes I'm just overly saturated with negative news, and that takes a lot out of me. So I do spend a lot of time recharging, a lot of time meditating, a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time eating right and doing what I have to do so that I can be my best self. And I think it's important that all of us Black women take some time to recharge and rejuvenate, because what can we do when we're exhausted?
You know, and I have to piggyback off that and agree. A few years ago, I did a lot of work with the Dream Defenders in Florida when I was living down there. And I will never forget, it had gotten to a point that I was crying every single day because I was constantly, I mean, the constant negative news and being out in the streets, you know, doing the protests, doing oh, we're getting a lot of feedback from Essie.
Let me see if I can go ahead and make her. All right, go ahead.
But yeah, so thank you. It had gotten so overwhelming. I had to take a step back from the movement because it was affecting my own personal health. You know, when I tell people this story, I said, you know, I never had children, but I felt all of the pain of all of the children that we lost. And it was too much for me. And so when I stepped back, I focused on myself, my health, my work, etc. And here I am a few years later, I had to come up with a different approach to help me remain engaged in the movement and in the fight. So this year, I'm not out in the streets like I would have been before, but now I'm doing a lot of back end work. I'm doing more organizing in the background, and also making sure that I practice mindfulness in the process, because, you know, to Ari's point, it is quite overwhelming, and it's truly a roller coaster ride of emotions that one goes through with dealing with all of this. I have not watched mainstream news in weeks. But yet I'm still very much aware of what's going on, and it's because it's in our face every day. So, you know, you have to pick and choose where you're getting your information from. So if that means cutting off from social media, cut off. If that means, you know, just getting up and say, you know what, I want to laugh and go watch a comedy just to get your mind off of things, one must do that, because we need all of us at our best for the fight. So basically, yeah, it causes more harm to the movement when we individually are not at our best. to the topic of these emotions, to the listeners and those who are watching, I would highly suggest, especially now, there's a lot of research showing that depression levels within the Black community has deepened. And I think that this is an opportune time for all of us to say, hey, you know what, let us go find that therapist.
Right.
We all, both Black men and women, we have, I believe that all that has transpired has reawakened a lot of the trauma that we have, the generational trauma
Right.
that we have. And we really do need to talk through it in order for us to continue to be at our healthiest, to fight for what we want for the future. And so that's something I'm hoping that everyone who's on this live really takes into consideration. Find that therapy, like that therapist. Even myself, I'm saying this, I'm in the process of looking for a new therapist, because you need to find someone that you're not only comfortable with, but you feel like you can trust with all of these vulnerable topics when it comes to racial trauma that we've all experienced. Even if you personally have not experienced racism because of the sheer nature of the color of your skin, you have experienced it, whether it had been through the infrastructure, your education, your healthcare, etc. And we need to talk through these things in order to move forward.
That's a great point, Charlaine. I think that a lot of us don't realize that we can have access to therapy through our health insurance coverage. Mm-hmm. So that's something everyone who's watching can look into. You might be covered with a few free therapy sessions, so look into it.
Yeah. And then I think Taraji P. Henson has this program that she's supporting right now specifically for free therapy for Black, I'm not sure if it's for Black men as well, but I do know Black women also. And if you Google therapy for Black girls or therapy for Black men, you'll find resources that actually has Black therapists open and available for us.
I was going to think about that point because I was thinking the most effective therapy that I felt like I received was actually from a Black woman therapist.
That's why I'm on the switch right now.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it was that immediate community that I kind of felt that, okay, she can get what I'm saying compared to I've been with other therapists who are from non-Black, and it's like, you
don't feel judged.
I'm getting therapy, but I'm not getting therapy, like deep into the root of the issue and understanding, like, okay, like you've been through this or something similar, so you understand it. There's definitely some strength and some like safety in that. Okay. As we're waiting for Essie to connect, I definitely want to go on and talk about the pandemic a little bit. Since we were talking about mental health issues, how has COVID-19 impacted you mentally, emotionally, physically, everythingly? Let me know. Arri, I'll let you start.
It's been tough. It's been tough. And I think that we're allowed to have a safe space here and just say, like, it's been a struggle just trying to figure everything out. But I've been super intentional on taking a lot more care of my health. I see a lot of people are turning up and getting wine down here in South Florida, but I think it's super important for us to think about our immune system and how we can best protect ourselves. And so we may want to avoid some of the vices that we're using to cope. Let's see, emotionally, I've just been trying to stay positive for my husband's sake. He's an educator and that's its own battles. My children are doing, they were doing virtual learning and that was a challenge in itself. So many times I just have a smile on my face and I'm just trying to make it happen for the family so that their spirits don't weigh down. But otherwise, I guess I'm holding in there, hanging in there. the best I can for everyone else around me. I do have friends who have been impacted by COVID. I have a friend right now whose fiance is on life support as complications due to COVID. So this is very, very real. And we don't realize it until it knocks on our front door. So while you're fighting, those who are fighting, make sure you have on a mask at the very minimum. But I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Welcome back, Essie. Oh, hold on. Let me see if you can go.
You guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. The question was, how has COVID-19 impacted you mentally, emotionally, and physically?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I wanted to speak on that and also kind of tie in a little bit of the last question about like showing up in the space and the movement as a Black woman and everything else too. I think that, I guess, because it all connects, because everything's happening at the same time in 2020. I think that there is a lot of empowerment that is felt when it comes to doing this work because of the impact that you have in doing the work. I think that if you are an organizer, activist, or whoever, I think that sometimes getting caught up on the what and not the who can leave us feeling overwhelmed and can also leave us feeling very, drained, discouraged. And so for me, it's been focusing on the who and focusing on the little and not so much on this marathon, because it's a marathon, not a sprint that we're in. But I guess with that being said, with COVID-19 in the beginning, it was a little bit tricky because I think that folks were not expecting, I think Americans were not expecting to be impacted. Let's be honest, Americans were chilling when it was outside of the borders, but when it came in the borders and it shut down, everyone was like, what the heck? And so I think that it took some adjusting, especially since like when you're working amongst a community that is vulnerable. At first I felt really overwhelmed because in Florida is like the worst place to be impacted by the pandemic. Not only are our people in the office are being dumb, but also like the unemployment sucks and all that stuff sucks too. And so many folks were impacted by that and like trying to readjust to how you were doing things and, doing things virtually and like having folks who need help, like demand so much of your time felt felt really overwhelming. And there was a lot of adjusting to do to that. And then also I was impacted as well. So that was a lot, but eventually I've kind of not so much focused on just the big pandemic. It's just a lot of resting, a lot of slowing down, a lot of just kind of just like my phone's been on do not disturb so that I can control what's coming in and out of, like, basically it's just a form of being able to control, like, I'm allowing you in my space, not so much of like everyone can just make demands on me, especially when you're giving so much of yourself. Like my phone's been on D&D. I've been just resting. I've just been trying to just lay low, trying to use this moment because everything happens for a reason. If we're going to be honest, like God has a way of doing stuff. And so I'm using this moment to breathe and recollect for whatever's to come when we get out of this, and so that's kind of been how I've been dealing with it. That's where I'm coming from.
I think I'm in a little bit of a different situation because I've been living in this type of situation for a few years now. Not because of COVID, but COVID just so happened to be an extra thing that's keeping me at home. And that's simply because I'm still rehabbing from a horrible car accident that I had. But I will say this. What this pandemic has revealed is really one of the issues that we have with American ideology, and that's the individualism. Mm-hmm. We don't care about our fellow man enough to at least say, hey, you know what? Let me listen to the scientists and try to do my part to control this. And as a result, our country is suffering most compared to the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, we have people, and especially the Black community, that are suffering because of this. It has revealed what the Black community has been saying for generations about these infrastructures that are not meant to help us or protect us in any way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, our neighbors are still ignoring this fact and not doing what they can to help us out by wearing their masks, by washing their hands, you know, just the little things. Mm-hmm. So for me, during this COVID, it's been more about trying to do my part as a health educator, okay? And do my part to talk to even my own brothers and sisters about what we need to do to protect one another, because we have too many things that are affecting the Black community, and we don't want for COVID to be the other thing to wipe us out, or to attempt to wipe us out, I should say.
To ask you guys, how has COVID-19 impacted your relationships, maintaining friendships, and also, if any, loved ones?
That's something that my sister and I talk about all the time. But it's a struggle to talk to those who don't want to listen, you know, who fear that they are invincible. Yes, we are all young, you know, all four of us, you know, we're in our youth, but that doesn't mean that we should sacrifice the elderly, because they're at much higher risk, and we're still going out and partying. We're still going out to the beaches, and we're still doing all of these things that are putting lives at risk. And it again goes back to that whole individualism as opposed to the community mindset that most other countries have, and that we are lacking. I do believe that, unfortunately, COVID has been overly politicized, that it has kind of shifted from being a health issue to a more political / racial issue as well. And this is the reason why we're having such problems with trying to address it. Okay. If it was kept to a health concern with the scientists and the experts being at the front lines, then maybe we would have been in a different, state of being. That's just my perspective on it. But we as Americans have shown our true colors in the fact that we don't care about anyone else but our individual selves as a whole.
I wanted to add something really quick, because I think that this COVID-19 situation is very complex, and I think that it's going to get politicized because it's happening in the middle of an election year. Mm-hmm. I mean, just to even give some perspective, in Florida alone, we're like, we already know the state of the climate politically, but in Florida alone, we're the lowest in benefits, but also like there has been studies that shown that the system has been rigged to keep unemployment numbers down. And it's the same thing with COVID-19, that, you know, our president is trying to keep cases numbers down, you know, and so I think that it's really hard to avoid it as it becoming a complex political or racial thing. I do feel like a lot of the mandatory shutdown ceased because once we found out that our community was being impacted the most, it was kind of like, okay, cool. Yes. And I think that it's not just because of behavior modification that's becoming. I think it's also because a lot of our community experience underlying health issues. So it's not just elderly, but also if you're a young person and you're not healthy, you can also be vulnerable to COVID-19. I just think that a lot, in spite of what personal feelings, like I guess, or to your point of individualism, I think there's a lot of personal feelings that folks have about COVID-19. And I have some personal feelings too, but I think that that does not matter, because at the end of the day, if people are dying, that's all that matters. And so I think that at the most we can do is be mindful, not just taking precautions against the virus, but also be mindful of how the intersections of this disease too. It's not just a health one, it's an economic one. You know, a lot of folks have been furloughed. A lot of folks have become primary caregivers and cannot work. There's an economic crisis that's also, you know, impacting Black and brown folks as well. And then, of course, we all know how the healthcare system is also racialized as well. So then that's becoming a thing. And then you got protesting happening. And then folks are, and then like they're exposing themselves to the virus more. So there's a lot of complexity that's happening around this. And I just think that it requires us to, I guess, like you said, think outside of ourselves and be mindful of the precautions that we can take. Like for folks making the choice of protest, maybe quarantine yourself before you come back home for 14 days after you protest, and if you're saying, I don't want to protest, like I haven't gone out protesting because I'm like, I live in really close proximity with my grandma, my mom. I'm not putting them at risk.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you're not going out there, okay, there's other things you can do to ground yourself in this moment. Just thinking about not just yourself, but thinking about others. And I think that a lot of other countries outside of America has had less cases because they thought about themselves, about others. I mean,
I think add to that, Essie?
Huh?
I would like to add to that just something. NPR reported, I think this was last week, if not, it was earlier this week. They actually did a study that found that the spread of infections were a lot lower for people who are protesting compared to those who are going out and partying. If you really pay attention to those who are protesting, many people are actually still practicing PPE. They're wearing their masks, they're wearing their face shields, etc. But more importantly, they're also outdoors. Mm-hmm. So that also helps to reduce the risk. But they're actually finding that social events and gatherings with people not wearing masks and parties in closed quarters are actually the ones, when they're doing the contact tracing, they're the ones who are actually contributing more to the problem. So it's quite fascinating, because I know the argument right now in the media is, well, what about all these protesters? They're out there, they're spreading the virus. And the truth of the matter is, it's the people who are, like, for example, here in Maryland, a guy who had a party in his home with 60 people, and so many of them came down with the illness. It's just, we have to reiterate what I said earlier and what Essie said, we have to start thinking about our friends and our families and be more mindful of them. I live with an elderly couple, both in their mid-70s. I'm definitely not going to go out there, not because I physically can't, but I'm mindful of that, and I'm not going to bring that back home because they are at risk. And heck, I'm at risk. I'm no longer in my 20s. So, we have to really, really be more mindful. Too many things are already killing us off, Black people. Too many things. Let's not increase the risk, to ourselves because of our selfishness.
I love how you guys are already hitting on my last question, which I'll just let Arri speak on, is COVID-19 a real concern during today's protesting? You already spoke on that, Charlaine. Did you hear it, Arri?
I'm sorry, if you could repeat it.
Is COVID-19 a real concern during today's protesting? Which you guys already began speaking on.
Yes.
So I would like to hear your thoughts on it.
Again, because this is a safe space, I was told that there was a lot of contact tracing to a protest that we had here in Fort Lauderdale, as it relates to new cases. And I'm just nervous because I don't know if that is true, or if that is something that has been told to discourage us from protesting. But there were a lot of people who were present who weren't wearing masks, and I don't know what it is that people feel like, what makes them feel invincible. I don't know what to do. On a personal level, all we can do is tell each other to wear masks. But if they don't, I was at one of the protests trying my best to keep my distance from those who weren't wearing a mask. So it's definitely a real concern. And just in case those statistics are true, let's just take heed, because not wearing a mask is not going to impel the movement.
Exactly.
I also think just go by your own personal conviction. If you feel personally convicted and personally led to go protest, then you go protest. If you feel led to go stay home. I mean, at the end of the day, whether there's a pandemic, there's always a degree of risk and a degree of putting your life on the line when you're protesting. I mean, it's been a lot of more public conversation about it. But like, protesting is not just going out there and hanging up a sign. Like, you actually put a target on your back when you protest. You know, you're in risk of getting arrested. You know, you're in risk of retaliation. Like, there's so much. And even back in the day, like, there wasn't no COVID-19, but folks were getting hosed and getting, you know, terrorized by the police. And so there is a level of risk. And this COVID-19 this happens to be a new risk. So if you feel led to protest, I don't think there's no policing on that. Just take adequate precautions. And if you feel led to do something else, be mindful as well. That's where I stand on it.
I think the key word with all that we're saying here, whether it be, you know, how you keep yourself safe, how you keep yourself healthy, it's really mindfulness. Practice mindfulness for your own self-preservation, and so that you can continue to fight, but also practice mindfulness when it comes to the actions that you are taking, the behaviors that you are engaging in to protect others.
I have a question, since I have so much intelligent Black women on the line. How are you encouraging this generation that feels invincible to COVID-19? Or how can we encourage? Because the newspaper wants to start an initiative this week with pictures of little kids, maybe thinking that if children are wearing masks, that we would want to protect our babies. And maybe we need to toss some pictures of the elderly in there. But how do you guys feel that we can impact our generation, those who are younger than us?
I think that because impact happens on different levels. So I'm thinking, like, where do I want to go with that? But I think that we just have to just normalize, because I think what's causing a lot of folks not taking it seriously is folks having distrust about the media, folks having distrust about the elected officials and how they're talking about it. So folks are just kind of feeling like this thing's not real, there's not much cases. And I think that folks at the end of the day have to understand, regardless of all the facts or this and that, the fact that there are real things happening in relation to the virus is the thing that we have to take in consideration. So the real things of, hey, there's people, I know someone who just caught the virus. I know somebody who family died from the virus, who lost parents from the virus. You know, I am also, you know, I'm Ghanaian American. So I know people who are impacted globally in terms of they can't eat because the shutdown caused starvation. Like, there's so much real instances that are actually happening. And I think that for young people to understand is you may have your distrust with the elected officials or with the information that you're getting, but also there's truth in stories and there's truth in personal experiences. And if you know that there's people having these personal experiences, do what you can to take precautions. So it's, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not even just wear a mask, wash your hands, and quarantine and stop hanging with your little friends, but it's also like, hey, if you can donate to a few food banks, can you do that too? Like, can you donate to some food banks? You know what I'm saying? Can you sign a couple of these petitions that's out here? You know, can you do some of that work, you know, as well? And then honestly, there's some tough love too. I had a friend that she kept, you know, her niece wanted to keep going to her friend's house. I said, you better tell her next time she comes, the door locked. And she had the door was locked because it's like, you're not taking it seriously. So boom, you know? So I think that it's just a level of, I think it's mistrust that's causing folks to kind of be like, I don't need to take it that seriously. And folks need to understand, well, you need to trust the personal experiences and the real stuff that's actually being affected by real people. That's what you should trust if you can't trust anything else.
You know, in my field, one of the things that we always like to do, and it kind of touches onto what you were saying, Essie, about the experience and the stories, but what we especially like to do with the children is to expose them, okay? Pre-COVID, for example, we would take them out to, you know, someplace that has a high population of homeless, for example, so that they can see with their own eyes. We would take them to a hospital so that they can see and understand, to talk to people, etc. And maybe that's what we have to do. We need to talk more and stop sugarcoating these things, because our children are much smarter than what many of us, you know, think they are, despite their age. You know, they could be 3 years old, they understand. They understand when someone is sick. They understand when someone is hurting. And so we need to have these real conversations and demonstrate the types of behaviors we want them to model as well. We need to be those role models for them. and also we can show them, you know, the best example I can think of is one of the things that we used to do. We used to have this this kind of substance we would put on people's hands, and we would tell them wash their hands, and we would turn off the lights and say, well, how well did you wash your hands, so that they can visually see why it's important for them to wash their hands in the technique that we showed them, because they didn't get all that goo out under the UV light. And so that helped them to really understand why the hand washing practice of, you know, singing the happy birthday song, etc., and doing all of the scratching, the scrubbing, the rubbing, and all of that, in order to get rid of everything. So with children, do not be afraid to use different types of techniques to demonstrate these things, to demonstrate how does you know, disease spread, for example. But again, just talk to them. They are adults in training, so talk to them clearly about what's happening, why it's happening, and allow them to also ask their questions that they may have, because this too is a learning experience for them. And that's really how we get to shape the consciousness of the future, by what's the word I'm looking for, but by developing more empathetic young people.
To answer your question, Arri, I'm thinking about talking to somebody like, I guess, the early 20s to my age. I would say just kind of saturation, I guess, of those same personal stories to those people they can connect to. I always love storytelling or TV shows or movies that I can see myself in. So I think it's the idea of kind of destroying the construct of invincibility with youth, because that is married together. And I think it's also a little bit of grief. They're grieving the previous life that they cannot right now live, because it's like, oh, I used to be able to go out, I used to be able to do this, and now all these things are not safe. So as we spoke earlier about mental health, a lot of people are not taking the time to say, why am I doing this? Why am I risking it all just for this temporary feeling? Because people are always in this search of just happiness and certain experiences and adventures that are just now too dangerous, and they need to understand the gravity of just taking a pause and just, as you say, bring up promoting more of the community idea, the communal idea of just, okay, I need to protect my family, I need to protect my friends by, oh, instead of hanging out with you, let me FaceTime you. Because people don't understand that. A lot of people are crying, I didn't get to do prom, which is, you know, hard, because I got to do that. Like, I didn't get to do prom, I didn't get to do grad bash, I didn't get to do certain things, I didn't get to go to graduation. A lot of grads didn't get to walk across that stage. So people might be reacting out of those experiences that they felt that they've been robbed of. So I think it's just kind of saturating of seeing like, hey, look at this person, they're in the hospital suffering from these symptoms, and they're 22 years old, and they're 18 years old, and they're 25 years old. Like, this is real, this can happen to you. So it's like, you know, you're not invincible, you know, your body can, you know, you can get exposed. So I guess just saying those stories over and over and over again, and putting those images will help, I don't know how you say undesensitized, but they're kind of desensitized to that this is real. So you kind of make this into some big folklore, like it's not really real, because you rather experience this adventure than to just kind of protect yourself for the long run.
I'd like to add to that, Arri.
Oh, girl, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. We both started speaking at the same time. No, I just wanted to say, Arri, even with that saturation, though, of the stories, there still has to be a balance, because just like we were speaking of earlier, feeling overwhelmed when there was too much coming at us, it's just really trying to find that balance where we're showing people these things exist, but also showing people the positive side of things as well. You know, showing how people are able to recover when they exercise. You know, the things that their providers are telling to them. You know, sharing these stories, I believe, will help to allow people to see these people look just like me. You know, they're young, they're old, you know, they're married, they're single, they're immigrant communities, you know, whatever. But try to definitely have a balance, because you don't want to have people say, you know what, I don't want to read this because it's the same thing over and over and over again, because then they do become desensitized, and we really don't want that. So definitely balance the good, the bad, and the ugly.
I was going to say that the truth is complex. So nonetheless, there's always going to be a bunch of good, bad, and ugly. I was going to say the balance should come from having accessible solutions, and just practical, accessible solutions. Because after you tell someone bad news, it's like, okay, so what I'm supposed to do? Like, just not be happy for like 4 months? Like, you know, like, I'm just being honest, because it's like some folks were like, yeah, go get a mask. And like, I go look at the mask is like $100. I'm like, okay, so what I'm supposed to do? So like, also making the solution and the response to the pandemic more accessible, more practical, more realistic is also that balance that you need. Because like, if you tell somebody like voting, you know, blah, 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 this and that, but it's like, okay, but I'm gonna vote. Like, you gotta also give them like
absentee ballots.
Yeah, like you gotta give them the tools to actually be successful. So it's kind of like telling folks, like, I kind of like the kind of how folks have been doing these Zoom parties. I kind of like the versus battle. It just kind of is making the current situation, you know, adding
manageable,
making things a little bit feel normal, even though they're not, and kind of like, you know, I ain't got to do all this stuff. I can come here and, you know, like finding different solutions and things that are just a little bit more practical, accessible, like as outside wearing a mask, you know, like even sometimes, you know, I see places giving folks masks. So it's one thing to turn people away that they can't come into a store because they don't have a mask, but then here, it's easy. Go put a mask on. Now you can go do your thing. So I think that coupled with like the real experiences, people also need something accessible and something practical to apply what they need to do about it.
And then to Essie's point, giving ideas of alternatives to help them cope during this time. Okay, well, you're used to going out to partying or something like that. You can still go out into an open park. You know, you can still meet up with your friends, but just socially distance. You know, you can still see each other and enjoy the sun, for example. So it's trying to come up with alternate ways to continue to engage with people. Unfortunately, I read a study that people have become more disconnected as a result of COVID. And obviously we know with the Zoom environment that it's becoming too much on people's visions and their fatigue and things like that. So providing those alternate routes of engagement and safe engagement, you know, would be a great thing to also provide to those individuals who are getting these stories and feel like they have nowhere to turn.
Thank you, ladies, so much. I appreciate you all.
No problem. I can't wait to read it.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Arri, for that almost final remarks kind of question. And it helps you help me help you. I definitely appreciate all the knowledge that you and gems that you drop, especially all of you with the solutions, readily available solutions. I think that's definitely what we're missing, along with community, this ideology, all of us coming together and just trying to push through. So again, I want to thank you, Arri, Essie, and Charlaine for coming through for the first time. IMB Woman Girl Talk. Definitely going to wrap up here. This is definitely going to be available on Facebook, Instagram platforms, and imbwoman.com. Again, ladies, if there's any final remarks, let people know how they can follow you, where they can reach out to you. Essie?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get in contact with me, you can reach out to me. I'm on Instagram at Empress Essie. So I don't know if I send you that @ name, but I guess I'll just drop the @ since we're on the video, you know, at EMPRESSESSII. And if you have any questions or want to figure out how to get plugged into different stuff, I'm all ears, I'm all open. But it was a pleasure having this conversation with you all, and just, you know, stay safe, and that's all I gotta say for y'all.
Arri?
I want to thank you all too. Thank you for this platform. Thank you, ladies, for your input. This has been encouraging for me this Sunday. And if anyone wants to follow me on IG, it's heavensent928. And also look into www.the Gazette as an alternative news source.
Yes.
Black news is just different from what we're watching on TV. So please have it.
Well, I will be the only person that will not provide a social media platform because everyone in my family knows I hardly check it. But I will say this, if you do want to get in touch with me, you have my name on the screen now. You can simply Google me, you will find me. My contact information is readily available, and I'm always here when it comes to those who are maybe in the public health sphere, who are looking for ideas for health education and things of that nature, especially as it pertains to the Black community.
Okay. And you guys, again, you can definitely follow us on Instagram at IMBWoman. And also you can find us on Facebook, IMBWoman, and our blog, imbwoman.com. Again, thank you so much, ladies. I hope to speak to you again in the future. You dropped so much beautiful knowledge, peace and love, and have a beautiful, wonderful Sunday, everyone.
Black girl magic to you all. Bye.
Bye.
God bless.